Coming up in this week's episode, what are you actually going to lose by not being in relationship or by just saying no to her? Welcome to The Liberation Effect with me, your host, Helen Villas. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of The Liberation Effect. Today I'm joined by Christine, who wrote in with one of the most powerful statements and opening statements that I've ever had on an email, and it was, I need to give myself permission to live my own life. And it was that line that made me obviously continue reading. And Christine goes on to explain the level of coercive control she's been under, financial control, demand, enmeshment, and asks that she be able to put down the guilt bricks and live her own life without fear of negative reaction. Christine, thank you for coming on. Has that summarized it well enough? Was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. So what is it that you want to get particularly from our time today? What would you like to leave here with?
I think getting it, I'd say through my head, but really it's through my heart, that it's okay to go and exactly that, live my own life, but also have some practical strategies to deal with some of the negativity, we'll call it that,
Okay.
is going to come back on me for doing that.
Okay, do you want to give me a bit of context? Show me, kind of tell me, explain what's been going on and what the fear is of that negativity.
For sure. So I would say that while there were kind of glimmers of how my mom was I'd say more in my teenage years, when I was younger, I think it was directed elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of used as the tool to get her needs met, basically,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't directed at me so much. As I got older, and especially in the last 2.5 years, it's gotten to the point where it's actually kind of crazy to look back how bad it was. Where maybe it's better if I just give an example.
Yeah, sure.
So this is after I moved out. My mom was upset because she has a dog, and I still help her with this dog, but I'm not there all the time. And so it was spring, it gets muddy, things get gross. And so I got a phone call from her where she was complaining about the fact she had to clean up the dog's paws and so on and so forth. And, I tried to empathize with her, and she just got really upset, and she knew I was driving, and I have like the setup so it can read texts, it can listen, blah, blah. So she hangs up on me because she's upset. That's very classic with her. And she proceeds to send me a barrage of texts so quickly, the car does not have enough time to read them before the next one comes in.
Wow.
Just, basically saying how upset she is, what a horrible person I am, and so on and so forth. Another example was, again, after I moved out, where she had asked me to stay a bit later. And there was no emergency. There was no significant reason for it. And I said, unfortunately, I can't today. I got some errands, blah, blah, blah. So she then got really upset with me. And in the next 12 hours after that, I got 13 emails telling me what a horrible person I was.
Gosh.
And I don't have any good examples from before I moved out, just because I was so I have lots of examples of the stuff, other issues, but I was so trapped in that mindset of just make it stop from her anger at me that it didn't occur to me to kind of try too hard to push back on some of these things. And the few times I did before it got that bad, I would definitely get kind of put back in my little box, I guess you could say. So, yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's intense. So your no is met with a huge assault on your character and personality.
Yeah, I'd say 9 times out of 10. There's the odd time, and that's the part that throws me off sometimes.
Uh-huh.
But you're always on edge going, how is this going to go down? Like, how is
Okay.
she going to react? Instead of not really, for lack of a better word, caring.
Okay.
It's, but yeah.
So is it just you and her, or is there anyone else around?
So my dad is in the picture, but he doesn't play an active daily role in, quite frankly, either of our lives. They don't live together, but they still have some of a relationship for other reasons.
Okay. That sounds confusing.
Yeah, I like they're separated, but my mom keeps kind of threatening divorce and things, but I think it suits her not to. And that's, I think, a running theme of a lot of the relationship kind of dynamics where
Mm.
she says one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I believed what she said was what she said because she told me what she said is what
Mm-hmm.
she said,
Mm-hmm.
what she means, rather. But the reality is very different. And it's taken me this long to realize that.
Mm.
So, for example, one time she told me, again, as an adult, oh, well, I don't expect you to live here until I die, like with her. But there was a lot
Mm.
more that makes me think otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it's come out, well, I don't like living alone. I don't like even eating alone. I don't, that's what the thing she's told me. And so I
Right.
think that's some of where this is coming from. But yeah, it's a bit of a
So
mess.
you're being punished for moving out as well?
Oh, gosh, yes, definitely.
Okay.
When I finally got to the point where I decided it was not a reality to live at home anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, there was lots of reasons why I was still living at home for so long. Obviously, one of them was because I was still in university finishing my PhD. And the
Mm-hmm.
grand plan was that we were all going to live in a multi generational home. It would have saved money for everybody. It would have been like great, I say in big quotations there, idea. And at the time we talked about it, I did have a partner. I was not living with that partner, but we had been, up until we broke up, we had been together for 11 years.
Gosh.
And he was
Okay.
fine with that idea. He was
Mm.
probably fine with that idea because his family, looking back, was a little
Mm.
enmeshed, boundary questionable there.
Okay.
So that's probably part of why he didn't raise an eyebrow at some of these things. And we broke up for completely other reasons. I realized the relationship was not going in a direction I was hoping for, and he was never going to change, and that's fine. But that's kind of why I stayed at home as long as I did. And then I realized it was not going to work. And so when I told her that I was going to move out, this was, I think it was in October. And when she heard that, obviously she was quite upset, even though I almost feel like anybody else would probably be like, yeah, that might be for the best because we were, interacting quite negatively, kind of, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
fighting is the right word because it was often more one sided. Not to say I didn't sometimes respond back, like I'm not
Mm.
completely passive, but yeah, you think you'd be happy if someone's causing that much stress, which is what she claimed
How
I
old are
was
you at this
doing
point?
to her. I was older at least. I was 41 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But yeah, it's kind of crazy looking back how my mindset, especially kind of COVID till I moved out, was just very sort of trapped in this bubble, I
Mm.
guess.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even occur to me for some of these things that to maybe move out or whatever because I was always told, oh, it's too expensive. You don't want to get loans. You don't want to do X, Y, and Z. So I had really sort of ingrained some of those things. And the other thing is like, oh, well, why don't you just go out and get a job and get a full time job, make some money,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. Which yeah, looking back. But even that would have been extremely hard because right before I moved out, it was getting to the point where getting out of the house for about an hour was a struggle because she would always, no, not always, I would say 7 out of 10 times would start a fight before I went out or after.
Okay. So she would
So it became,
sabotage
yeah.
all the time. Yeah, okay.
So, and then even getting a job was going to be challenging. Previously, I had worked out of the house. It was totally fine. We would sometimes coordinate schedules because we had a different dog at the time who couldn't be at home by itself. And that was okay. But right around COVID, and I don't know that it was really COVID that did it, or if because as she was starting to get older and some other pressures, I really don't know. But definitely around that time is when things really changed.
Right.
And got so much worse.
Okay.
So sorry, this is quite rambly, but
no, you're okay. It's interesting to understand.
Back to when I told her I moved out, or wanted to move out rather. This was in October of, just backing it up because I've been moved out for a little over a year. So October 2023, I think.
Okay.
I don't know if the math is right. But she then got really upset. We tend to buy Christmas presents really early just to make it easier. So she got my Christmas presents and just chucked them. It was like, here. And then she also was like, well, you might as well have this. And then she gave me my birthday present, which I didn't even realize she bought that early. My birthday's in March.
Oh, right. Okay. Wow.
This is October. Okay. And then she gave me my PhD graduation. She gave me a necklace, which I appreciate. But I hadn't even had a defense date set.
Oh, wow.
Like, this is how far back. And then as things progressed in terms of kind of the realities of trying to move out, because I'd lived at home so long, I had, like, for example, some DVDs that were intermingled with hers, right? So she went through all the stuff and she was like, oh, here. And she was throwing my DVDs just on the floor and kind of like very discardy feeling.
It sounds a bit like a couple getting divorced in bad terms. That kind of like, have your stuff back, and like being really like kind of petty about, well, I bought that cushion, it's mine, and you can't have it, even though it's that kind of integral part of whatever. It sounds exhausting. And I'm just thinking, as a mother, as if my child said, I want to move out, my own response would be, okay, where are you going? What do you need? Do you want help moving? Do you want a kettle? Do you need, a toaster? Or do you, like, it would be, and yet it sounds like there was just such punishment for wanting autonomy.
Yes.
And you were 41 at that point?
Yes.
And up until then, you'd lived with her the entire time?
Yes.
And had your partner also lived with you both, or not?
No. The plan was to kind of, when we were all done school and we started in our careers, that we'd all live together. But no, he hadn't actually moved in.
So he hadn't moved in. How was she about him?
Mixed. Sometimes it was okay. Other times, like, for example, one time we all went on vacation together, and I had a hotel room that had like a little kitchenette.
Right.
And since I hadn't sort of had that experience of kind of living in my own space, I thought it'd be kind of fun to make breakfast for her and obviously my partner, and we could have, like, her as close to having somebody over as I was going to get while still living at home. And she did not react well to it. She claimed it was because I hadn't asked her what she wanted for breakfast, even though I had so many options. And I mean, I lived with her. I kind of had some ideas of what she liked and made sure
Mm-hmm.
she had those things, but it became a bit of a thing. Towards the end of my relationship with him, when I was, at his place, she would often text, like and that was the other thing, because I had school, I was working, etc. I didn't have a ton of time to spend with him, which is also not
Mm-hmm.
what caused the breakup, but that was the reality. And he had his own work and school and things too. But she would frequently text, like, a lot, even though it was only a few hours. And
Mm.
it, again, at the time, didn't occur to me that this was, like, not appropriate. Like,
Right.
you know, I
So
just was
total
really
enmeshment.
blind. Yeah,
I
very, very
hear
blind.
I'm hearing you blame yourself over and over and over and over again. So
Yes.
that you didn't see it. But this is literally what happens, is that you have been conditioned and isolated, and the reaction to your search for autonomy is so massive that of course it scares you, and of course you go, I'm not going to do that thing. And it was really interesting that you were saying, like, 7 times out of 10 she would like sabotage you going out, whether it was coming back or before you went. And then 9 times out of 10 she wouldn't hear your no, but that one time that, and so that is what makes it destabilizing, because it's unpredictable. If it was 10 times out of 10, it's predictable. You know, every time I go out, I'm going to get shouted at. You don't know when 3 times out of 10 you're fine to go. And that therefore puts you in this state of not knowing and unpredictability, which in turn creates fear and anxiety, because we like things as humans. Our brains like order, and it likes predictability and anchors and knowledge of what is going to happen. If A and B happen, then C will happen. And so the other part of that then also being that those little brief moments, those 3 times and that one time, create hope. They create the toxic hope that, oh, she is okay with me saying no to her. Right? Oh, it is all right for me to go out and to be a normal human being with like friends and whatever. I am allowed to be my own person. Maybe I've just caught her on a bad day and it must be my fault she's reacted, because she can do it nicely. So therefore, it must be me. I must have to change for her to be able to treat me well. How much of that is ringing true for you?
Absolutely. Because even though I've, gone to therapy, I've done other things to get knowledgeable about the fact
Mm-hmm.
that my mom is basically, among other things, a vulnerable narcissist. That's my head. That's the
Mm-hmm.
problem, is that my heart still has a lot of that. And I think that's
Okay.
where the conflict is.
So the state of play at the moment, what is it like now? What are you struggling with particularly right now as well?
Okay, so now that I've moved out, I still go back to her place 4 times a week, up on average 4 hours a day. So the problem is too, related to that, was that I was right before I moved out, asked, and that was actually even before that, but basically asked not to work during the day. On the off chance that she gets a full-time job during the day outside the home, because she works mainly from home, so that I could care for her dog. Now, she did ask me while I was still living at home if I wanted a dog, and I said yes, but it's very clear this dog is not my dog. It's not like I dumped my dog on
Mm-hmm.
her,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And so she wants me to take responsibility basically for her dog. And before I left, I said yes. And I've been helping out. But the problem with that, obviously, is that because of the type of work I have, it's contracts. So I need to apply for lots of different ones to see what
Mm-hmm.
I will get,
Mm-hmm.
and to limit myself to only certain times or whatever, because they're teaching contracts, is a problem. And it's posed a problem. realistically, it's kind of impacted me financially. And yeah, I need to stop doing that basically.
What stops
And
you? What stops you telling her, no, this is ridiculous?
again, her anger. So I
Okay.
actually did on sort of the basically on the sly, or basically without telling her, switched one of my jobs to during the day, but outside of when I normally go over. But
Okay,
aside
on the
from being,
sly. On the
yeah,
sly. Ooh, I'm making a note and we're coming back to
yeah.
that phrase. Okay, carry on.
So aside from the fact that that's being kind of dishonest in a way because I haven't vocalized it, but on the other
Dishonest?
hand, well, kind of, because I haven't told her. The problem gets into the fact that she's now started making appointments or doing things outside of our agreed upon kind of hours.
Right.
So, like, for example, she made a dentist appointment at like an hour that I need to show up to her house an hour earlier than I normally do. I
Okay.
teach out like very close to that time.
Christine,
So,
I want to reflect back to you what you're telling me. And I wonder if you hear it happening to me, what your thoughts will be. So that my mum makes me go over to her house for four times a week for at least 4 hours each time, and has asked me not to work full time so that I can do that for her. And I can't tell her that I've actually gone and got myself a job during the daytime because she'll react so badly. But now she's started booking appointments outside of the agreed hours and is asking me to turn up earlier, which means that I might mess up with my job, or I can't do those things. What do you think?
it's kind of ridiculous for sure.
What do you think about the fact that a parent is asking their child not to work?
I don't think a healthy parent, someone who loves their kid, would do that.
Right. Then I'm intrigued to know, before we go any further down the road, what is it that in those 4 hours you're just there to look after the dog?
Nope, sometimes that's the main thing for sure, but sometimes I also do stuff around the house. So, like yard care or other projects,
Is she
basically, which
paying you
is
for any of this?
so the lawn mowing she is, even though I told her she didn't have to, but she likes to use that to tell people, well, I pay my kid to mow my lawn. And she loves it because they go back saying, after what she did to you, she should be doing that for free.
What did you do to her?
I moved out and left her with her dog.
Okay. Can you understand for me, like from my point of view, how gross it is for her to be doing this to you?
If yeah, it sounds like I said ridiculous, but on the other hand, my problem is that my own brain goes and says, "Well, you're an adult. You should have acted like it." Like you're
What
acting
do you
like a
mean?
child. Well, you're acting like a child just going along with whatever she says.
Right. Because why are you
And
acting like a child?
well, because she's treating me like it and because I am
Okay.
afraid of her reactions.
Right. Tell me
Even
about that
though
bit.
I think it's just the problem is I just want, like I kind of was saying before when I was living at home, but I don't think it got any better, is that I just wanted to stop. And I know she does a lot of this to put me sort of off balance, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really struggling between kind of my head and my emotions on that because my head gets it. And to a point, the how unbalanced or off balance I get has gotten better, which is hard to believe, but it used to be like a total 9 or 10, like
Right.
how upsetting it was to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's gotten, depending on how bad it is, anywhere between a 5 and a 7. So it's gotten better,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still bothers me, I guess.
What is it you are scared of?
I think a little bit of it is the potential loss of the relationship, as kind of nutty as that sounds. It's not a very good one. Um,
I'm gonna ask you, Christine, to stop calling yourself nutty and crazy. And this is we're talking about really serious, like, abuse. This is like Stockholm syndrome. This is you have been controlled so heavily, and it's not nutty. It's dreadful and it's sad. It's not nutty or crazy or so. I want to ask you to try and show younger you some compassion, because she didn't know how unfair and how abusive this situation was. Okay. Okay. Are you okay? How are you feeling right now?
it's funny because I've heard someone else refer to it as abuse, but it was like I was telling them I just didn't see myself as someone who would be abused. And I don't mean that in a I'm too special or,
No, no,
you
I
know,
know.
I don't mean it in that sense. It's just because I was told what abuse was, ironically, by my
Mhm.
mom. And to be fair,
Mhm.
I think she was abused as in her life.
Mhm.
But because it didn't look like that, it's hard to kind of connect with that. But if somebody like if I was reading through some of the stuff that happened because I'd written some things down and looking back at it, yeah, it is, right?
Mhm.
But it's hard to kind of, I don't know, maybe accept. I don't know if that's the right word, but I don't know. I can't think of a better one. But
How to hard to label it as abuse?
yeah,
Because
even
what would it
though,
mean if you did?
well, first of all, that my mom wasn't the good person she claimed she
Mhm.
was, that maybe I wasn't some of the things she labeled me as, like
And what would that
a
mean if?
spoiled brat and so on and so forth. I guess then I don't know who I am to a certain extent, like
Yeah.
because I've been told for so long.
Mhm.
And even if some of them go in my head, go, I don't think I'm like that,
Mhm.
there's still that doubt, right? Because it's funny if somebody was just on the street or somebody else in my life sort of said these things to me, I'd be like, okay, whatever there, buddy. Like,
Okay.
it wouldn't have the same effect. But because your parent, on paper anyway, is supposed to care about you, is supposed to, you know,
Know you better than you
know,
know yourself.
oh gosh, yes. So that hits kind of differently than just someone else saying those things. So yeah, if that's not true, then what
Then who
is?
are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? Who is she? What does it mean for the relationship? Right?
Yeah.
So, what would it mean for the relationship?
Realistically, if I kind of accepted just how bad it was, I think I wouldn't want to have a relationship.
And then what would that feel like? Or what would it mean?
Grief for sure, because then
Okay.
I couldn't be in, I don't know if denial is quite the right word. There's definitely a little bit of that, but there's no going back, I guess.
And then what?
Like
You said grief. And then what? And then what would happen after that?
maybe peace. I don't know.
Is that logical brain or is that emotional brain?
I think it's logical brain with the emotional brain hoping that it's true. That it would be worth it in the end instead of regret.
So, how does being scared of her responses help you?
It's more predictable because then I stay in my little box. and things carry on pretty much the way they have been.
So if you stay in your little box, you get to continue the relationship with your mother, and the world gets to stay as you know it. And
Even
that
if the
feels
world doesn't.
safer than
Yeah.
the alternative. So if you had a magic wand and you could do anything you wanted, you can't change who she is. That's the only thing. You can't change who she is. All you can change is you, your life, what it looks like, and that sort of thing. So how would it change then?
I would feel free to pursue whatever opportunities I want to. We'll go if I want to take a job in another country, I could, you know, and not feel weighed down or like I've clipped my own wings and then live a life of regret. I mean, because I did those things, because I
So,
let,
are you fearful of the regret?
you know what? Yes, that's a really good point. I'm
Mm,
afraid that as she gets older and tries to put more and more guilt on me, I'm going to stay more and more and more stuck.
mm.
And my life will basically go by. And yeah,
And then what? What would happen then when she dies?
I would be a lot older and left going, why didn't I do these things before?
Yeah, what for? What for did I stay in that space with her?
Yeah.
But there's a fear now, even to separate from her would create that regret too. So the last 20 odd years, yeah.
I think so because it's what I've known.
Well, we can also get into that self-punishing, blaming place of, oh my God, I mean, you've done it quite a lot, that nutty and the crazy kind of, we can get into that place of, why didn't I leave before? Why didn't I say, well, why have I tolerated this demand from her? I mean, and this is quite unusual language for me to use, but it is intensely fucked up that she is demanding you do not work during the day so that you can go and look after her dog and clean her house and do her lawn and her yard work 4 hours a day, 4 times a week, minimum. That is, I can't tell you how fucked up that is.
Yeah, especially because it's not even like that she's not capable of doing a lot of
That
these
is,
things.
yeah, that is something.
Like on
There are
top of
dog
that.
sitters, there are cleaning things, there's gardening services. There are other people that could be doing that. And what's so bloody ironic for me is that she's demanding you don't work so that she can.
Yeah.
And why does she think she's entitled to your time in that way? What is it that she thinks she's got over you, that she's given you that allows her to demand that of you, if that makes sense?
Oh, yeah. Because she claims that she, first of all, I mean, it goes all the way back. Well, she stayed at home while I was a younger child. She didn't put me in daycare because to her, daycare is horrible. In
I'm
fact, she
getting
told
really
me,
angry for you.
yeah.
I get
Um,
carry on, sorry. I just wanted
okay.
to own it because it's. Whew.
Because more recently, she's like, oh, I should have just put you in daycare. I should have divorced your father, but I didn't want you to grow up, poor like I had and things like that. More later on, it was things like, well, you got to stay at home for free during university, which is sort of true because I didn't pay for rent, but I did pay for the previous dogs, some of their medical bills, like thousands. I did pay for some other stuff and I did help out, and I'm totally fine with that around the house. I did lots of
Mm-hmm.
stuff around the house, even helped her with home renos. So I'm willing to accept that part, but it's kind of like,
No, I'm
but
gonna
it's
no,
not
no. We're not accepting that part about university. Sorry, just sticking that there. Carry on, please.
to now. is because, oh, well, I would never have gotten a dog if you didn't say that yes and that you would have helped and blah, 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 which I also am not, I don't think is entirely true. And the other funny thing is that when I was living at home with the first dog who passed away,
Mm-hmm.
she was much more involved in that dog's care.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, she was a lot less involved, like to the point where this is a funny, kind of funny, not funny, but it just goes to show how ridiculous it was. Is that I would be in the kitchen because the dog was still learning to be potty trained. I would be in the kitchen with the dog, and she would sit, in the living room on the couch watching YouTube videos about other people's dogs. And I remember the irony of that
The
clicking in, like,
irony. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
And it's not that she never did anything, like she did do some of like the physical care, but a lot of it fell on me. And so because I moved out and now it's fallen on her, all the things I used to do, like much more so,
Mm-hmm.
how dare I? It's a betrayal. Those were her words at one point, and things like that. So, in
Okay,
fact,
go on.
oh,
In
just
fact,
in fact, this one even I can see is like unreasonable. But she said, "Oh yeah, this is before I moved out. There's going to be a time because I said it would help as I am now." When you're like, oh, I don't have enough money. I need to go and work. Sorry, mom. Like, you're just going to have to deal with stuff. And she labeled that also a betrayal. And even I can see that one is like, come on.
yeah, but she's setting it
Like,
up. She's telling you
oh,
you're
yeah.
not allowed to do these things, right? I just wrote down, oh, my anger for you. Oh, bless you. And what I don't want you to feel is responsible for my feeling in that. Okay? So I want to make it really clear. I'm not angry with you. I'm angry for you that you've been treated that way. You don't need to manage that for me in any way, shape, or form. I'm well able to. It's not your fault. I feel that way. But what she has done is made you responsible for all her choices, all her self-inflicted, I mean, bare minimum parenting. I didn't put you in daycare. Okay, that was her choice. You don't need to pay her back for not going to daycare. And actually, there's an argument that it would have been better for you to go to daycare socially, like worldview wise. There's such benefits for children going into social groups outside of the family home that the idea that she did you some big favor by not putting you in daycare is quite honestly horseshit. And then on top of that, the I stayed with your father so you weren't poor. There are worse things than being poor. I know it's not easy to be poor, but I also know that a child in a home that is loved is going to be better off than a child at home in a wealthy home that is full of conflict and anger and being set a love model that is dependent on all these things. But she chose not to put you in daycare. She chose to stay with your father. It wasn't about you growing up poor. It was about her not being poor. Because if she had left him, she'd have had to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously doesn't like working because she keeps getting you to do it. If you're scared of rejection, of saying no, have no idea how to trust people, you're not alone, and you don't have to heal alone either. That's what the Hub is for. It's a membership community designed for survivors just like you. Every month, we dive into powerful courses, we hold live calls, and connect in a supportive, understanding space so you can break free from the past and build healthy, fulfilling relationships. Maybe it's time to stop surviving and instead start thriving. Visit jointhehub.ac today using the code POD20 to get £20 off your first month's membership. I can't wait to see you there. Take care. Bye. Then the bit with the dog. Oh no, actually the university bit. And you said, oh, I can sort of see. Nope. No, 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 no. My oldest is about to kind of embark on the whole university thing. And we sat down and had a chat the other night. And I said to him, I need to know what your plan is vaguely so that I can just start budgeting ahead of time so that if I'm going to have to be paying some rent or whatever it is, I know that that's coming up upon me in financially. Okay, all right, Mum. And my desire for him is that he does not start life saddled with huge debt from going to university, but also that he takes some responsibility for his bills so that he'll get a job or whatever as well, but not to his detriment, not so that it hurts him. Now, if he lives at home to go to university, I'm actually going to encourage him to move out because I think part of university is that kind of social, it's like a transitional stage, isn't it? To living alone or being a grown up to get the life skills. But if he decides he wants to stay at home, that's okay. He's not going to be, that's not going to be held over him. I'm not doing that as a favour. He might be asked to contribute if he can. But again, I don't want him experiencing anything detrimental in order to further his education and study, right? Yes, he'll be asked to help with housework, but as is a reasonable, but that's more about his life skills than it is about me, right?
Yeah.
The idea that that has been held over you as a reason for obligation and guilt is ludicrous, as is everything that we've said so far, particularly daycare. I mean, just honestly. And then the idea that the dog is hers. It does not matter. When people say, yeah, I'll help out with the dog, they mean like you go on holiday for a week, I might have it, or I'll have it for a weekend while you go away, or I'll pop in if you're at something and you can't get back and you're stuck in traffic, I'll go and feed it and let it out, right? That is not, I'll be there 4 hours a day tending to an animal that is not mine, that you chose to have. That is wholly unreasonable. What are you feeling as I'm saying this?
I think it is, hearing it back is sort of starting to make it more clear about how unreasonable she's
Okay.
being, basically, for
I'm
sure.
wondering how guarded you feel against it.
I think it's things that I kind of already had inklings of, but because of all that guilt being put on me, I didn't entertain as much,
Okay.
if that kind of makes sense.
So I'm not sure you answered my question. How guarded do you feel against hearing it?
Well, not that much, I guess, to answer
Okay.
more
So
directly.
how scared are you of losing that relationship with her?
I would say emotionally, it's probably like maybe 20% of me concerned about it, because realistically, she doesn't know half the stuff in my life anymore. I don't share things with her anymore
Okay.
because it opens me up to criticism, or it
Mm-hmm.
gets put back on how it's going to impact her life,
Okay.
um, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or like it just opens me up to things I just don't want to. So because of that, she knows so little about my life now. It's kind of like, am I really missing much? Probably not.
Okay. Okay. That sounded like a very logical answer. Is it? Is there an emotional answer?
I think that's where most of my heart is. There's just that little inkling left of where it's like, oh, but you want your parent, or you want to have a
Mm.
relationship with your parent. That's small, you
Mm-hmm.
know, part of me. But the reality is, if it's not healthy, then is that really a good thing?
But there's
Probably
also,
not.
well, right, but there's I hear the grief in that. I want a
Because the
parent. I want someone who loved me, who wants the best for me, who acknowledges what I've achieved, who lifts me up and pushes me forward and wants me in their life in a lovely way. And I hear
def-
that grief sitting there.
I think that's, yeah, definitely true. And also, I think more consistency. Like, I know we're all human. We have good days, we have bad days, but when you can't rely on someone to support you, or if they do support you, they throw it back in your face later, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really a good parent or a good
No,
even person.
no. What's it like to say that out loud? To acknowledge not being a good person.
That one's harder
Okay.
because of basically the narrative I believed for so long,
Mm-hmm.
that to kind of acknowledge that is a little bit harder, that part.
What's the emotion around it?
Sadness
Okay.
that I didn't have parents who loved me. I mean, never mind unconditionally, but
Mm-hmm.
loved me for me, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, rather than what I could do,
Uh-huh.
what I provided for them, even if it wasn't in direct doing stuff, it was, she could be that savior person, but it was only for her
Mm.
sometimes.
What does it mean? There's such a, well, I suppose I was trying to find a question that is on the edge, and it's something about your value being tied to what you can offer rather than in terms of support, as in practical help and self sacrifice and servitude, rather than like interesting subjects, hanging out. There's a there's a there's a grief around not being known, and that the only way in which she knows you is in how you serve her. And if you don't do that right, she abandons you.
That is
And
true.
do you know how I know that she abandons you? When you don't do it right.
No.
When we started, you talked about the phone call when she rang you, and you couldn't help, or you were empathizing but didn't drop everything and go to her, and she hung up on you.
Mm. And that is something she does a lot.
So you don't do
So
what she wants, and she drops you. And I have a horrible feeling for you that you start saying, I'm not coming over 4 times a week, I'm actually going to get a full time job. And I wonder if this is what you're scared of too, is that she's just going to drop you.
yeah, I think so.
And then what would that prove to you?
That she doesn't actually love me,
And then what does that mean?
that I am basically alone. Like, obviously, I have friends and stuff, but I mean, like, it's kind of like an emotional orphan. Your parents are there, but,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean anything.
So basically, alone, emotional orphan, beautiful phrase, and so accurate. But I might argue that you already are.
Yeah.
What do you
I
reckon?
just have the illusion.
Yeah.
I, s- yeah.
So even now, even in this servitude space, you are still an emotional orphan because there is not a seeing of you. The
No.
fact that you've said to me earlier that you've stopped telling her stuff you don't share with her anymore, and that's, I don't know if it's she's okay with it or not, but that she's not, it seems that well, tell me, how is she with that? Does she know?
She doesn't know that I haven't shared with her. I know if she did find out about it, of course she would be
Mm-hmm.
upset in a way that's different than someone else who I think would be like, "Oh, why didn't you feel like you could tell me this?" or why,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there would be, I think, maybe a bit more self-reflection there and maybe some of their own sadness, but I think they would be kind of like, why, rather than being upset,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm supposed to know these things. And even sometimes with when you, the few things I do still tell her, it feels more like an inquisition than with the
Mm-hmm.
questions. Well, why, you sure this didn't happen? Or why didn't you do this? Or, why, like, it just doesn't feel supportive,
Mm.
if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. It just feels very dissecting.
Right. So what you're saying to me is that if she found out stuff about you, she that you haven't told her already, she would not be upset because you felt like you needed to hide it, but she would be upset because it would be denying her something she feels entitled to.
Yes,
Because information is currency. And if she has the information, who can she share it with? What can she do with it? What does it give her? What power does it give her?
definitely. I would say it gives her the power to, well, she's often done this, twist things and then share it with people.
Right. Twist things. Say a little bit more.
Like, even when she was, or she's tried to, like with the fact I moved out and things like that, she tried to make it seem like I was harming her, causing her stress, causing her, mental problems and things like that because I was moving out. But, and she shared this with my aunt and uncle, but it sounds like because they've had glimmers of how she is, they didn't buy it. Because my aunt said to me at one point, because I didn't raise these things with her, she's like, "Oh, yeah, I just thought it was funny because it was like, she just didn't consider the fact things could change or things like that." But she also has other friends who are more receptive and will be like, "Oh yeah, those, you know millennials or whatever, they're just so selfish and their boundaries and things like that."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All the enablers coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
So they're all
And
showing you how unsafe they are. I mean,
oh, yes. And that's the one thing too about my father, is he's definitely gone from being kind of very disconnected, very not involved in things like that, to shifting to be total enabler.
mm, okay. Your relationship with her is dependent on your servitude. Her not, she does not see you. She uses your behavior as evidence of her victimhood to her friends or people around her, when your behavior is actually just very, very appropriate for an adult human being that wants their autonomy in their own life. She's had you, it's almost like I've got the images of people who've been kidnapped and kept in like cellars or, for years. And I say that carefully because I don't want to kind of dismiss their experience, but also recognizing was it Elizabeth Smart who was kidnapped and taken into public places, but never said anything to police or anybody else because she was so terrified of what would happen in as a result. Because the level of control that those people had over her was gigantic. And that is what it is like being under this coercive control, this Stockholm syndrome. You have been convinced all this time that unless you are prioritizing her and her needs above absolutely everything, you are a worthless, soulless, terrible excuse for a human being.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when that guilt speaks to you, what does it tell you about yourself?
That there might be some truth to it.
Okay.
Because I don't have a great reference of what, and I know this is not the best word to use, but normal is a normal relationship.
Okay.
I know that this is wrong, but because I don't have, it's like, well, when should you think of yourself?
Yeah. So you're struggling to know what's an appropriate level of self-care, self-prioritization. Okay, let's look at a tool for that, because I think that's something everyone who's had any kind of experience like this is going to really struggle with. And ultimately, self-prioritization, my go-to with that is myself first and last and everything else in between. So I'm not denying my children. So it's me first, then my children, then probably my job, and then my dogs, and then everything else after that. And then at the bottom of it, me again. And the way in which that actually works in practicality is that means I have to say no to my children sometimes. That means that I am not willfully hurting somebody through my own self-interest, but I'm also not buying into their disappointment because I don't meet their demand.
Huh?
Okay? So, for example, if my friend wants me to go to an event with them, but on the day that it is, or if, or I just don't want to go, or whatever reason, I cannot go, and I say, sorry, that's not something I want to do, but thank you for inviting me. Their reaction to that is theirs. Because I'm not being unkind. I'm not being mean. I'm just meeting my need first, right? If I was to consistently put work before my children, so working late every night and not making them dinner or being with them while they have dinner or being interested in their day or just talking, spending time with them, that would ultimately be hurtful, right? But I'm prioritizing my need to work in that moment, but the cost of that. So it's always about cost and gain. What is the cost of me doing this? Is that mine to manage? So for my children, it is for me to manage, but my friend, it isn't, right?
Yep.
Last week, I went on holiday on my own with a friend without the children, and I had a huge internal battle over whether or not that was a fair thing, because I was denying them a holiday. I was being self-indulgent, and ultimately, the way I sort of, I suppose, justified it, but it's not even justification. The way I made peace and reconciled it was I was close to burnout. And if I didn't take a break, that meant that I was not being responsible, then the cost to them would be a lot higher than them not going on a little holiday with me. And it was 4 days. It wasn't like it was 3 weeks or whatever, And they were loved and looked after and safe. And I knew that they would be. I did everything that made sure that they were okay. So meeting my need will have cost something to them, but the cost of me not meeting my need would have been much higher to them, right?
Okay.
So this is how I do it. It's the checks and balances, cost and gain, and whose responsibility is it for the reaction? So you saying to your mother, I'm getting a full-time job in the day, I can no longer come over 4 hours a day, 4 times a week, and her anger to that is hers. That is not yours,
Okay.
right? You are actually not costing her anything other than a denial of her sense of entitlement, right?
Yeah.
Your I suppose the thing is to recognize that your guilt is hugely weaponized against you and
Hmm.
is also therefore over amplified. And it's trying to protect you from your mother's anger. But do you need to be protected from that anymore?
Not realistically, no.
What's the
I think
hesitation? There's a.
I think it's because do get thrown off balance by her anger still sometimes. And
Okay, let's do it.
so I
Come
definitely think that's something that is still a problem.
on. Okay, so tell me about her anger and what happens in that moment. You say to her no, and she goes angry. What happens to you physically?
I definitely feel more of like a freezing type
Mm-hmm.
response.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely feel it kind of like my body sort of tensing up for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've gotten better with this one, not automatically going into the fawning kind of let's just make
Mm-hmm.
this better and make her stop. It's not perfect, but it's better. So, but even if I'm not there, let's say it was a phone call or like a barrage of texts, then it just kind of messes with my day
Mm-hmm.
because it's upset me and it's better than it used to be even for that because I would be upset all day.
Wait, I'm going to
Now
pause you and I'm going to
yep,
pull you back to what happens to you physically. So you physically go into freeze and then you've tried to stop fawning, and then emotionally, what are the kind of thoughts that are going through your head about it?
I get kind of upset that I've upset her.
Okay,
That
upset that you've upset her because you've said no to her.
basically,
How responsible for her feelings do you feel?
this again goes into a head versus heart. My head goes, it shouldn't really matter. My heart goes, oh, but there you've gone and just done it again. Like she said, you're just selfish or things like that. And so my heart does feel responsible for it.
Okay, and it says you're selfish for saying no to her.
Mhm.
How old do you feel in that moment when you're feeling that freeze and selfish
Definitely a
narratives?
small child.
Small child. Do you
Like,
remember an incident that feels familiar to it?
you know what's funny? I don't remember something specific, but I do remember as a child, like I am introverted, but I feel like as a child it was worse because I was always sort of hesitant to do the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't I remember this from like quite young, but I don't remember like a specific thing that made me start doing that.
Well, that's probably because it was pre-verbal. Probably because it would have been, a baby will start saying no really quite small. And I'm trying to think if it's even as early as 6 months. And when I say saying no, I mean like no. In fact, when they don't want their bottle or feeding as a small baby, the child will turn their head away, and that's their no. And how the parent even reacts to that. Come on, you need a bit more, you need a bit more. Because the parent wants to sleep or whatever it might be, is telling the child immediately how their no is being received, whether it's ignored or accepted, right? And I don't think people realise quite how early this will start. So it's probably pre-verbal, but you will have learnt very young, and the fact that you never had daycare, so nobody else was saying it's okay to say no. So you had nobody challenging that belief system. So I want to notice to you this level of isolation that you've experienced. You said you had a partner for 11 years, but they felt it was quite normal. They were there because of their own stuff.
Yeah.
And how often would you see him?
I probably see him. It did vary because sometimes we'd go to school/work together, but then we'd go our separate ways. But
Okay.
on average, probably 3 times a week for a few hours.
Would you stay over it with him or?
Sometimes. That's actually kind of funny too, because when I first started staying over, this was like, let's say, a Friday into a Saturday. Even that, my mom would get upset because I'd come home, let's say, around 2 o'clock. And otherwise, I was like participating and stuff like that. And she would be like, oh, well, you need to come home sooner because half the
Because
day's over. And yeah.
there's a treating of you as a surrogate spouse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. When you're saying no to her from now on, and that small child feeling that comes up,
Yeah.
the language that I'm going to invite you to use is, it's okay, I'm an adult, I've got this, we don't need to be scared of her anymore. Her feelings are for her to manage, it's wholly unreasonable for her to expect XYZ of me. Does not make me a
Okay.
bad person. And you're talking to yourself, but you're inner child as well. It doesn't make me a bad person to say no, right? And then
Definitely.
let's just go, we're going to do the then what exercise. And I don't know if you've heard me do this before, but it's a really cool kind of thing to deal with the fear of the anger, okay?
Okay.
So you say no to her and she gets angry. Then what happens?
Then I start to feel some of those emotions, those freezing
Mm-hmm.
emotions, and feeling kind of upset.
Okay, and then what?
Well, I could start saying some of those things that you mentioned.
Okay, well,
That
no, let's talk
it's
about it as it is now, how it before
okay.
using that tool. So then what? You feel the emotions?
Then I want to avoid it. I want to make it stop, make it go away. And then I go, what can I do to make that happen? Sometimes my logical side will override it saying, hey, wait a minute, just ride it out, it'll pass.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I can do that if it's not too strong of an emotion.
Okay, and then what happens?
Um,
Sorry, if we stay with the fear and the emotion and it's overwhelming you, and then what? What happens then? She gets really mad, and then what? You get their feeling, and then what?
Sometimes I'll just start tuning her out just so I can kind of start to feel a little bit better and not so
Mm-hmm.
stressed out.
And then what?
And then usually I get back to a less emotional state and I go, oh, she'll just go through this. She'll do
Mm-hmm.
her volcanic temper and she'll maybe
Okay.
like storm off or whatever and it'll pass.
Okay, and then what happens?
Then we usually ride out her semi stonewalling silent phase and then it goes back to normal.
And then what?
And then it starts up again. The next time I
Mm.
say no. And then it becomes a matter of, do I really want to say no and deal with this? Or do I just want to not deal with it?
Why are you keeping her happy over yourself?
My first response to that is because that's what I was trained to do.
Mm.
But I guess it feels, in the moment, it feels less draining than dealing with her anger. Even though in the long run,
Mm.
it is more draining. But in that little moment, it just feels less of a mountain.
You know, when you say things like it's what I was trained to do, I agree with you, by the way, but from this point forward, it was what I was trained to do, but I no longer agree to do it. Okay?
Okay.
Because when you do that, you kind of almost disempower yourself in terms of that you take the choice out of
Ooh.
it. And there is a choice. And I think people really struggle with this when I talk about this, that we do have choice. It's not about saying you can't make that choice. It's about knowing that we are making a choice rather than disempowering ourselves and saying, well, I haven't got a choice, so I can't do anything. Yes, you do have a choice. It's okay. You're choosing the easier route, or what feels like the easier route, and you're sacrificing yourself, but own it. Own that. Because otherwise, all you do is continue the cycle and you buy into your own helplessness and you collude with your victimhood, right? And
Yeah.
actually, if you stand there and say, I'm saying yes this time because it's easier, then it's more powerful. And actually, at some point, you're going to get sick of yourself doing that, right? Because you're
Yeah.
going to be like, why am I making her life easier to hurt myself? You know, why am I hurting myself to make her life easier? Makes sense?
Absolutely.
So, what we're going to is what is it that she can actually do to you with all this great big anger? What could she actually do?
Other than do what she's already doing, which is tell stories about me to other people or just cut me off completely, probably not much
Okay,
else.
right?
So,
So, all she's got is telling people about you, stories about you. So, and I'm going to say this and it's going to sound brutal. So what? Like, these are people who are willing to believe. Are they actually important to you? Do you know them?
the people who believe her, I would say I don't really care
Okay,
for the
good.
most part. And then the people I think either don't really pay attention to what she has to say or just doesn't believe her, like some of my
Hmm.
relatives, I think, you know,
Okay, so those ones don't really believe her, and that's fine. If
yeah,
she goes around waffling about how awful you are because you won't be there for like 4 days a week, 4 hours a time, they're not going to be like, yeah, you're evil.
no.
No, okay, good, 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 good. So I've got a funny feeling that they're going to be cheering you on, those ones. And they're going to be saying it was about bloody time. What do you think?
I think so because it was actually funny. The first coffee I had with my uncle when I moved out, and I had not said a word about anything that was going on. His first words after hello was, so is my sister controlling?
Ooh.
And I hadn't said anything. And I was like, wow. So,
Do you know
yeah,
why he asked you that?
probably because he suspected it.
No, I think he knew and he wanted to know if you knew.
Ah, good one.
He
Yeah,
didn't want to come in at you going, "Oh my God, thank God you're out there," in case you were still defending it. And
yeah,
I imagine I'm hypothesizing, so I'm potentially completely wrong, but
that makes sense.
most of the time, especially in family systems, they tread very carefully to make sure the person knows Also they don't upset the apple cart. Because the last thing he needs is you going back going, Uncle said that you're really controlling, and then him getting in
Yeah.
trouble from her, although maybe he doesn't care so much. Okay, so in terms of what she can actually do, she can smear you to these people who you don't know who are ready to believe it, and therefore you don't give a shit, right? Is that
Yep.
fair? Is that
Yes.
actually true that you don't care about these strangers thinking that of you?
Yep.
Okay,
I
cool.
don't care.
Good. So then the family members don't believe it and also know her and what she's like, and so are more likely to be supportive. Then after that, what was there that she could actually do?
That she could cut me off. And there's one other thing I realized she might do is try and blame me again for her upsetness, her if she starts to feel depressed or other related things.
Is she not
Um,
doing that already anyway?
oh, yeah, she did. She
Okay.
definitely
So that
blames
won't
me for
actually
that.
change. That's not going to
That's true.
change. Right. Can you see? See what
Yep.
I'm trying to show you? Like, that she has no power. Yes, she might cut you off. What, financially?
Nope. Just like communication wise.
And that would be how for you?
A little weird because she is so involved
Mm-hmm.
and messages a lot even when I'm not over and things like that. So I think it would be just a little weird feeling. A tiny, tiny part of me maybe for certain things might be upset, but then I can't tell her stuff anyway. So there's so much I can't share with her that it's already kind of been the relationship has already been kind of loosened, I guess. Like,
May I offer a
yeah,
reasonably stark observation?
for sure.
There is no relationship.
Yeah.
What is a relationship? What does that mean to you, that word?
I think it's when you have someone you can share things with that they want to celebrate your good things, they want to support your bad things. Like, as in, when
Yeah,
you
I know
have
what you
something
mean.
bad happen
Yeah.
to you, support you. Sure, sometimes if they think you're really going down a horrible path, maybe have, a caring
Mm-hmm.
word with you,
Mm-hmm.
but not bring you down just for the sake of it. And it's not just based on how, like, transactional. It's not a transactional relationship, a real good relationship, especially one
Okay.
that is supposed to be someone you love.
Right. So it's knowing somebody.
Yes.
It's wanting to understand them, their world, and what's going on, and supporting them when they're having a bad time, celebrating them when they're having a good time, engaging in their interests, and wanting to know them and see them. What
It,
of that do you get with your mother now?
not much, if
Okay.
any.
So, what I'm observing is that there is already no relationship. And you've already said it anyway, I think, really. And that
Yeah.
kind of thing of here she is demanding you die on your sword for her, yet has absolutely no interest in you as a human being at all.
Not a genuine one. No.
All the things that you said, like, with the like not working and the being available and doing this and coming home before 2 o'clock when you stay over at your partner's house, all of those things are about isolating, control. They're about keeping you stuck in servitude. Because if you can't work, you're not earning money. And if you're not
Mm-hmm.
earning money, you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything, and you are therefore dependent on her. She is creating dependence constantly and has done since you were born. Even the not sending you to
Yeah.
daycare. She is demanding dependence of you and then punishing you for it.
Yeah.
What are you actually going to lose by not being in relationship or by just saying no to her?
Realistically, nothing. I'm going to lose a lot more if I don't.
And there it is. What will you lose if you stay in relationship with her?
Well, my first answer is basically myself, but realistically, I'm going to be kept small. It's kind of
Right.
like tease, since from where I'm from, hockey's important. And so there's a quote,
Mm-hmm.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So while
Yes.
it's hard to say for sure that, I'd have an amazing career or whatever, but if I don't even try,
Right.
then there's zero chance. And that's kind of what's
Yeah.
happening now, is that I'm really not pursuing a lot of opportunities, whether that is career or even just to kind of make me happier, or I'm
Okay.
trying to shoehorn them in around stuff
Okay.
because I'm not saying no to her
Right.
or changing things.
So you need to find your no, build it up, start practicing it in all the different places, and then use it with her. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So isn't it interesting that if you end or say no and she then discards you and you lose the relationship, you stand to gain things. And if you stay in the relationship, you lose yourself. What will it cost you?
Nothing to lose the relationship, but yeah, so
There will be.
much
Go on. So much.
so much to lose if I don't. And I think that's why I wanted to come on here, was that I can see the writing on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to get even harder, especially as she does get older, she does get some health stuff, then I'm going to get even more
Mm-hmm.
guilt thrown on me. And it's going to be harder than if I start doing that now.
Yes.
Whereas I will just, if I do, you know, say no to her and she cuts me off, there is going to be that grief there for a bit, but not as much grief and regret, I think, as if I don't start doing this. So
Right.
yeah.
And you have spent long enough waiting for her to be a good mum to you and doing everything you can. And what I would like to remind you is you do not have power over how she behaves. She has
True.
taught you you do, but you do
Oh,
not.
absolutely. Yeah.
And there's a grief even in there that we have to let go of that idea that we ever had any control over their behavior, because it made us feel powerful in those moments as we grew as adults, whatever it might have been. In any time we've been in relationship with them, we have believed we could control how they treated us. And it is the greatest lie they tell us, because they're going to treat us the way they want to, whatever we do, but they will blame us for it
Yeah.
if we don't like it, right?
Yeah.
You are looking at a life. You're at a fork, a crossroads.
But
You can either carry on down the road of being at her beck and call to avoid her anger, or you can face her anger or not by just blocking or muting or whatever it might be when she's ranting. And remember, if someone is continuously texting and emailing you abusive, character destructive emails and messages, that is harassment. That is harassment. And
yeah.
if a stranger was doing it to you, what would you do?
Oh, yeah, I would probably go to the police if it was really bad, or at the
Right,
very least change my number.
right. You would block them, go to the police, all those things.
Yep.
Just because she's your mother, it does not give her permission to be destructive in your life. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you are at this crossroads, this fork, and it is about choice. And there's no judgment. either choice is okay. It's just about owning that it is a choice. But when it comes to guilt, ask who it benefits for me to think about myself in this way. Is this something I would judge someone else for doing? Is this something that other people would think would make me a terrible human being by not doing whatever it is? Is this guilt conditioned, or is this actually compromising one of my values? Right?
Yeah.
And the big thing is differentiating between shame and guilt. Because guilt says I did a bad thing. Shame says I am a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And be careful you're not confusing the two, because it might be that's going on too.
Yeah.
Yeah? There is nothing shameful about wanting to live your life and have a career and not be at your parents' beck and call, even if they are elderly and infirm. It is not your responsibility to make her life easier. It is not fair of her to expect that of you, and you are not a bad person for not wanting to do it. Okay.
Makes sense.
How are you feeling now?
Better. The only thing I would say is that there's a little anxiety around what to actually say to her.
Okay.
Past, okay, so I said, no, sorry, I can't do that thing, or I can't come to this, or because I've got some other stuff going on, I won't be able to come over as often. Okay. Ragey at me. I've tried to kind of keep my responses Ray Rocky, simple, not defending. But sometimes when I start to get anxious, I don't know what to say. My default is just not to say much, which is okay. But sometimes she'll be like, well, don't you care? Or don't you this? Or to try and draw me back in.
Yeah.
And
That's exactly what she's trying to do.
Don't know how to handle those attempts to draw me back in. And I think maybe if I had that, then I would be okay.
What do you think I might say? Have you any thoughts?
Not to try not to engage too much, I guess, and just kind of let her stew. Kind of.
Pretty much. So my suggestion would be, you say, just to let you know, I'm no longer going to be coming over 4 times a week anymore. It's not sustainable. I've got a job. Or you don't even need to say the last bit. By the way, I'm no longer doing this. You could, if you wanted to, soften the blow with here's a dog walker that someone's recommended, or whatever it might be that the dog needs, and the house. But you're not obliged to do that. But it might soften it a little bit, but it probably won't. So there's very little point, maybe. And then she kicks off, and you just can either say, I don't have to explain this. You can either say, and it sounds gaslighty, I'm sorry you feel that way. Or you just don't have to respond at all. When she is sucking you back into the drama and the argument, no, you just don't engage.
Okay.
You can say, until you can speak to me rationally, I'm not going to engage with you. So you can set the boundary and say, because we don't want to stonewall back, but having said that, sometimes there are places where that's appropriate. So you don't necessarily stonewall back, but you might say, until you can speak to me calmly, I'm not going to talk to you.
Okay.
I'm not engaging.
That makes sense.
And then just don't. Just because she messages, notice all the places where you are feeling obliged. So just because she's emailed or messaged doesn't mean it demands a response. You don't have to reply just because she wants one. You don't have to do anything just because she wants it. Once you have stated this is what's going to happen, That is it. There's no need for anything further. You do not need to justify, defend, explain. You just say, this is this. You're not being unreasonable saying, I'm no longer coming over 4 times a week for 4 hours a day.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
that is totally reasonable. Her reaction to it is the thing that is unreasonable. Okay?
Yeah.
And you could observe it, but you might poke the bear and all those things. But once you've told her what's going to happen, there's no need for anything further. How does
Okay.
that feel? I can see an anxiety on your face. There's a fear.
Uh, a little bit, but I think it would be more empowering. So I think that is helpful. It's just, I guess it's one of those things you just need to practice.
Yeah, and it's one of those
Um,
things where you have to put like things in place. So I'm going to put my phone down and walk away. I'm going to put it on do not disturb. I'm going to archive chats, mute, whatever it might be, block numbers, not, things like putting emails into their own folders so they don't even show up in your inbox, and that you can choose when you go to look at things. Because it's that thing of when we see those reactions, there's this like need to defend ourselves and explain and try and just get them to
okay.
understand so that they don't think we're terrible. They don't think we're terrible. They're annoyed because we're not doing what they want. They're
Yeah.
using the idea that we're terrible to try and control and shame us into capitulation. And who wants to be in that relationship,
Yeah. True.
right?
Okay.
Okay. Before we finish, was there anything else that you need from me, you need to ask or clarify?
Uh, no, I just wanted to
No?
say thank you.
Well, been my pleasure, and thank you for coming on. Obviously, any questions, anything that we haven't come up with or covered, just ping me a little email, and I can absolutely respond to that. It's not a problem. Thank you, Christine, so much for coming on. And I guess, as ever, all that remains to be said is take care. Bye.
Bye.